Everton and Nottingham Forest charged by the Premier League for breaking spending rules. What does this mean for the Premier League season of 23-24? What will the punishment be, and could it affect who goes down from the Premier League to the Championship this season? Hello guys, welcome back to yet another video. As you can see, we are talking about some breaking news in the Premier League today regarding Everton and Nottingham Forest, but this could have ramifications that affect all of the teams in the bottom half of the Premier League, especially when it comes to the relegation dogfight this season, with possible points deductions coming before the end of the season. One thing I do need to make clear though is no points deductions have been handed out today or will be anytime soon, to be honest. A lot of the dates when it comes to this is really sort of speculation. It could be April that this is resolved, it could even go on until after this season 23-24 has finished, but they have been charged, which means the possibility of punishments such as fines and, more importantly, points deductions could come into play this season. Before we really get into it, guys, do share your thoughts down in the comments, especially if you are an Everton or Nottingham Forest fan. Even if you're not, do share your thoughts in the comments down below nonetheless. I won't set a like target for this video as it's not really a happy news story for Everton and Nottingham Forest fans, but do feel free to hit the like button anyway, just to support the video and the channel. And if you've not already subscribed, please be sure to do so for Premier League content. So then, let's really get into it. As of today, the 15th of January 2024, the Premier League has come out and said it's charging Everton and Nottingham Forest for their spending. To go into more detail, the Premier League clubs had to submit their accounts before the end of 2023 regarding the season of 22-23, and these numbers, now having been looked at by the Premier League under scrutiny, has brought us to where we are now. PSR, profit and sustainability rules. Now, for those of you guys that aren't too familiar with what that means, basically Premier League clubs, and the same applies for EFL clubs as well, have got to spend within their means. They can have losses on the books, but not to an extreme extent. In the Premier League, you can lose roughly 35 million a season, and it's roughly about 13 million in the EFL Championship. Now, both Nottingham Forest and Everton are being looked at over the last 3 seasons. Obviously, the numbers will differ between the two because Nottingham Forest spent 2 of their last 3 seasons in the EFL Championship, and it is no surprise that in Nottingham Forest's case, it's the season in the Premier League which has seen most of the spending. Now, Nottingham Forest are prepared to put up a defence to this. They're already bringing in lawyers, and one of the big talking points when it comes to Nottingham Forest in particular is the sale of Brennan Johnson. Now, the accounts take us up to about June 2023. Brennan Johnson was sold after that, and if he had been sold in that time frame, it could have balanced Nottingham Forest's books. Now, I think that is their strongest line of defence for this. As for Everton, once again, the numbers don't add up for the Premier League, and to be honest, at this moment in time, they are appealing the first points deduction that they've had, and this won't really look very good in that appeal as they'll be seen as serial offenders. Now, something that an Everton fan did say online, which I picked up and thought was quite interesting, is the Premier League looks at this over a 3-year time frame. Now, if you went really crazy in one season, that means you could technically be punished 3 seasons in a row because of that, because your numbers won't add up in the Premier League's eyes over the 3-season sample size that they look at, which is really not very fair. And in regards to Everton's appeal for the first punishment, we are expecting to find out what happens with that before the end of the season, which obviously makes sense with the 10-point deduction hitting them this season. When it comes to this set of sanctions on Nottingham Forest and Everton, as I say, they've both got 2 weeks to put up their defence, which Nottingham Forest look like they're really going to go for, to try and prevent a punishment, and a points deduction is the worst kind of punishment. Obviously, a big fine does hurt, but points are more important, especially when these two are both in the bottom half of the Premier League, and the ramifications of a relegation when it comes to the finances is absolutely massive. It's been previously stated that the Premier League wants to have this wrapped up by the 8th of April to prevent relegated teams appealing. Now, that is something that has happened in previous seasons, where if Everton had been hit with a points deduction last season or the season before, the likes of Leicester, Leeds, so on and so forth could have stayed up, and that's why they've now been pressing charges to the Premier League, trying to get something out of it for themselves, which does make some sense, I suppose. You don't want these long complications which teams that have been relegated a couple seasons ago are now saying, hang on, we want some money, we want this, we should have stayed up that season. It's just a bit of a mess. Another thing we obviously need to highlight is Manchester City, which is something everyone brings up when it comes to points deductions and breaking spending rules, and obviously Chelsea as well. With Manchester City, it is a completely different kettle of fish, and I'm really bored of hearing it, and I'm really bored of saying it, but the amount of charges they've got will take the Premier League such a long time to get round to sorting. One thing I will say is when they do get to that point, let's say by 2030 possibly, Manchester City could be in for a very heavy punishment, the likes of which we will have never seen before and probably will never see again. But of course the focus for today's video, as I say, is Everton and Nottingham Forest because they are the teams that have been charged. Now let's have a look at the Premier League table, which you can see beside me here. At the moment, of course, with no points deductions added on for Nottingham Forest and no further points deductions added on for Everton, you can see both are above the bottom three of the Premier League. Now, one thing I have said in a previous video when Everton got their first points deduction was, not that you ever want a points deduction, but if you were to have one, this might be a season where you get away with it, if you see what I mean, because the three teams that have come up from the Championship have really struggled and they are still in the bottom three of the Premier League. That said, I've enjoyed Luton Town and they've been the underdog story, which if they stay up, that would be remarkable. And although, in my opinion, no real football fan wants to see any team get hit with points deductions because ultimately it's not fair on the fans. They've not caused this, but they get punished by this. It will give Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United a much better chance of staying up. I know it's harsh, but that is the reality of football. You've got to take what's in front of you, and it will increase the chances of those bottom three staying up. And of course, the teams that are also just above the bottom three, your Brentfords, your Palaces, your Fulham, they will all benefit from this if these teams do get hit with a points deduction. Now, when it comes to the points deduction itself, it's been rumoured it could be 6 points if they were found guilty. It could be 10 points. It also depends on the defence. It also depends if Everton are going to have some points added back on after their appeal for the first points deduction, because all of this is quite unprecedented. We don't actually know what's going to happen. If it was to be 10 points for both sides, that would put Everton down to bottom of the table with -20 for the season, which is ridiculous. Forest would go down to 10 points and also join the bottom three. If it was 6 points, Everton go into the bottom three, Forest stay above it because it would be Everton, Burnley and Sheffield United. Either way, Luton Town are bound to come out of this bottom three with whatever points deduction is levelled at these clubs. And the cruel irony of it is football does balance itself out. Luton Town know full well themselves the harsh reality of a points deduction when they were landed with a 30-point deduction all those seasons ago, and it was a terrible time for Luton. They could actually benefit from a points deduction this season. As I say, it's not nice for Nottingham Forest or Everton fans to hear that, and I have got complete sympathy for them. Ultimately, we just need to wait and see. It really does make things quite difficult to read when it comes to the Premier League now. The punishment could actually happen as the season's finished. So teams might think, okay, we're 7 points clear of the bottom three, we've stayed up, and then just after the season's finished, the points deduction could come in then. It is possible that could happen, and a team would be relegated without a chance of being able to save themselves with games afterwards, which would be cruel, but once again, we don't know what the Premier League's going to do. The likelihood of it being this season the punishments are handed out is pretty high. It could be next season, but ultimately I think the Premier League have given themselves enough time for them to get the punishment in this season. And as I say, complete sympathy for the Everton fans who, I mean, this is just awful. If it's a second points deduction, it is truly awful. That said, I still think they've got a decent chance of staying up because they would be a mid-table team this season without any points deductions. As for Nottingham Forest, it's been great to have them back in the Premier League, and even with a points deduction, I still think they'd have a good chance of staying up, depending on the deduction, because Nuno has had a good bounce since coming in and Forest have picked up some good results. And the final thing I've got to say is points deductions, in a weird way, can galvanise you. We've seen Everton almost get better since the points deduction. They were pretty solid up until the points deduction, but it can almost bring a team together. It feels like it's you against the world, and I don't know, maybe, just maybe, they might both stay up having been hit with a points deduction again later this season. Guys, as I say, that is all the news up until now. Do share your thoughts down below on what your feelings are, especially if you are an Everton or Forest fan. Do you think it's right that you've been charged? I've seen a few Forest fans saying, look, do you know what, we deserve this, we've spent crazy money. As for Everton fans, honestly, they must just feel like everything is going against them, but we shall see. I'm going to leave it there, guys. Make sure to drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to share your thoughts. We'll bring you more news on this when we have it. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.